Okay, here we go. Thank you for coming to the Tuesday night Awareness Through Movement lesson in the Feldenkrais method, streaming live from Jefferson Farm Kitchen in Jacksonville. We're here every Tuesday from 6:30, usually to about 8, but it won't go quite so long today just because I'm in the middle of a training for some work I'm doing to help people deal with emotional trauma, and so I'm going to keep it short and sweet today. So today we're talking about the structure of support through your skeleton. And before we start, I'm just going to give people a little bit of time to get on the call, and I'm going to discuss what that means. What is the structure of support? So let me share my screen and pull up some images that might help. Patricia, hi there, how are you? Can you hear me? Because it's not social distancing that we need, it's physical distancing. And
correct.
Right. Yeah, I pretty much put everything on Zoom. So I'm doing 3 live streams a week. So we do on Saturday, we do a women's support circle for, it's called Surpassing Our Losses. That's at 9 a.m. So that's it's more, we do a little bit of a meditation and it's a women's empowerment circle. And then we do a process to release some emotional block or some belief that's limiting. And then on Friday, I do a group called 12 Steps Out of Grief, which is based on the 12 steps. And it's a whole new adaptation that's completely different yet again. So just to talk for a minute about the difference between Feldenkrais and yoga, they have similar effects on some level, but Feldenkrais is about changing how we organize ourselves in space and but it's about changing how we organize ourselves and being more present and mindful to the way that we move through space. But it's really a physical, concrete metaphor for how we move through life. So it helps improve our learning and the way that we deal with problems and the way that it actually translates to everything we do. So if you go back to a yoga practice, it will improve your yoga practice because you'll be more aware of where are you stable, where are you solid, where are you overextended. So for those reasons, it's really good for helping prevent injury when you're doing something physical, but it metaphorically as well. It's like you start to notice, oh, I am helping too many people. I'm overextended in how I'm, navigating my relationships. And then it helps you sort of come back within and get centered and do something for yourself. But the thing that I want to point out is that there is always uncertainty. The other day I was having what I was jokingly calling like one of those park bench moments, which is, I was making reference to, have you ever read Eckhart Tolle's story?
No.
His story is basically that he was down and out. He was sitting in a park bench in a park, just all of a sudden had this aha moment, this realization that there is no such thing as the future. The future is a construct because whenever we get there, it's now. And so even though we feel like things are really strange right now because we don't know what the future will bring, the truth is we never know what the future will bring. It's always now. So really, on some level, nothing has changed. Yeah. And so it's these shifts in perception that I think can help people have less anxiety, but also a physical sense of being grounded. So my topic today, my theme, if you will, is structural support. And wondering how to get this to.
I see it.
Okay. So if you can imagine walking on a beach that's covered with pebbles barefoot, right? That's, I mean, just thinking about it, just imagining it, you can feel how uncomfortable that is on your feet. So that is your proprioceptive system. Your proprioceptive system is the part of you that if you thought about, imagine you went to the, in a normal world, you had, it's still a normal world. I have to stop talking that way. Imagine you had a a lemon tree outside, and you went outside and you picked this lemon tree and it was ripe and ready to go, and you brought it inside and you cut it open and you sliced it, and you could smell the scent of the lemon. And you can and imagine actually taking that slice of lemon and taking a little bite of it, and just, you can feel how your mouth is already salivating just thinking about it, right? So that is also a part of the proprioceptive system, right? So the way that we respond to our environment, is it safe? Is it not safe? But also that is actually a really good example of the connection between the mind and the body. And one of the principles that we use in Feldenkrais is that ability to imagine things. And
Right.
they were using this they've been using this in the Olympics since the 60s. I think it was in, it was kind of the whole, before the whole Cold War thing started between the U.S. and Russia. The Russians were really game to win the Olympics and to show the Americans that they were better. And so they started experimenting with these alternative ways of training, one of which included, it's been proven in sports psychology extensively at this point, that, the team, say you have a basketball team, the team that practices 3 hours a day for 5 days a week or 6 days a week does not do as well as the team that practices 1 hour a day and visualizes 1 hour a day. So what it's doing is it's connecting the neurons or the brain cells and creating a neural pathway that turns the skill set that they're striving for into a superhighway.
Makes sense, because I used to show dressage, and same thing. I would imagine the test I was writing and what things I needed to do, preparing in the corners to bend my horse and that sort of thing. So it's very similar to that.
It is, and that is one of the first places that I ever really started doing visualization. And it's a little bit easier on some level with dressage, because we are talking about imagining geometric shapes, right?
Correct. Yes.
And then I started to notice that even there was this subtlety. Am I imagining it? Like, the easiest way for me to remember a pattern that takes 2 or 3 minutes or whatever it takes, it was to visualize it from the top, like as if I was looking from on high, which would be a form of disassociated visualization. But then if you think about, what's her name, Mary Wanless, who does
yes, oh yes,
that winning feeling. And so it was about taking that to the next level, where you're imagining yourself riding the actual test
right
from the inside,
right.
and feeling the shifts in your weight that are such an important part of communication. And Feldenkrais definitely helps with that. I mean, it helps because it's all about becoming more subtle. And and in any sport, but it's particularly in dressage, where we're using our physical body as a means of communication, the more subtle we are with our shifts and our weight, the easier it is for the horse to really get what we're doing. So this idea of living without support is like, I think it's like walking barefoot over stones. I think the reason that phrase came to me was because I was feeling myself cringe walk, because I hate walking over barefoot on that kind of a beach, like give me a beach that's completely sandy, but it just like makes me cringe. And so that's what happens when you cringe, is like an exaggeration of what happens if you have poor posture, if you're somebody, I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit just to make it obvious, but somebody who's really depressed, like depressed teenagers who are very shy and introverted, their head hangs forward. All the muscles on the back of their body are doing the work, because the weight of the head, the human head, is 15 pounds. I don't even know what a horse's head weighs, but they're heavy, as you know. But so what we're looking for is a resting length of the muscles, where the length of the muscle is the same on the front of the body as the back of the body, so that the head is supported over the skeleton. And the skeleton can do its job, which is to support the body in space, which makes gravity a stabilizing factor, so that the muscles are free for dancing and riding and laughing and playing and doing all that crazy stuff that kids do.
Yes. Yeah.
And so awareness through movement is a way of practicing mindfulness, expanding awareness that happens to use movement as the medium. Why is that? Because everyone moves. I mean, he could have just as easily used language as a medium because everyone speaks, but this is more concrete. He wanted something that would take us to a place that's nonverbal. And here again is another overlap between awareness through movement and riding, because when you work with horses, I mean,
Right.
talk to them, but it is ultimately a form of nonverbal communication.
Right.
So the other image I wanted to share, just to get the point across, is this image of the, oops, not that one, this one. So it's the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right. Suspension bridge, yes.
Yeah, so what is structural tension? Structural tension is an idea that comes from a field called structural dynamics, which is really interesting. And it talks about using how to approach your life from a creative point of view instead of a problem solving point of view. And that's very much in alignment with how the Feldenkrais method works. It's extremely holistic because we focus on what works. We don't focus on what's wrong. So structural tension is the idea that, let's say the metal part of the bridge represents the skeleton. And you can see, let's say this is a skeleton, this column that I'm got the cursor on, let's say it's facing the rocks here, right? So if it were a person, it were facing the rocks. Then these muscles, like these, the tensile wires on the front would represent the front of the body, and the tensile wires on the back would represent all the muscles on the back of the body. And if you can imagine that if the muscles on the back were really, really tight, it would skew the whole thing so that it was
tilting backwards, right?
Backwards, right. So what we do, and it's not entirely clear how this works, but all I can tell you is that it does work, and that people, they're all over the world do Feldenkrais, because it's like resetting. It's like, if you think of your nervous system like a computer, when you go through this process of mindfully expanding your awareness and thinking about how you organize yourself, it's as if it reboots the computer. Mm-hmm. So that you'll find that when you begin, your back is up off the floor. Sometimes when you are at the end of the lesson, the floor has become more comfortable because your muscles have lengthened and become softer.
Yes.
Not because there's any change in the floor, right?
Right.
Yeah. But mostly this whole process is done without demonstration. It's like a verbally guided process, because the point is that you learn to figure it out for yourself, and it's kind of like a treasure hunt or a koan, a movement koan. So if you would stand up for a moment and do a scan in standing, because this is about learning to translate these principles into functions, and standing is a primal function. If we couldn't stand, then it would not be so happy. But just allow yourself to sink into the weight of your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of your arms, such that maybe your shoulders feel a little bit heavier when you really let go of your arms. And notice that standing is actually not being still. It's like when you drive down the road and you have to make these micro little adjustments to the steering wheel right and left to keep going straight. That's what balance is really like. We're never actually standing still. So just to exaggerate that a little bit, maybe shift your weight a little bit forward and back until you just stop that. And notice if you tend to have more of your weight on your heels or more of your weight on the balls of your feet. And another reference move I'd like you to do is to notice where you're standing, what's right in front of you, and turn a little bit to the right, only as far as you can go without strain. And mark whatever you see. Just notice if you're able to turn as far as a picture on the wall, or just notice it, don't judge it. Just, it's like just taking inventory, and then come back forward and then turn to the left and do the same thing. So notice how far you can turn easily with your head, your neck, your whole body without strain. And we, that's the other piece I would say, is that we never go beyond what's easy and what's comfortable. And then when you're ready, if you would, please lie on your back. My 4 favorite words in the whole English language. And lie with your legs long and your arms long on a mat or a quilt. Just make sure that it's fairly even. You know, there's nothing sort of lumpy underneath you, so that you can use the floor as a mirror to reflect your tonus. So just notice how much pressure you feel under different parts of your body. Notice if there's more pressure under your pelvis than your knees, for example, or under your heels. Surely, for most people, one heel touches the floor in a slightly different position than the other. And that if you follow that up through your legs into your hips, that's a reflection of whether one hip is more externally rotated than the other. Notice the space you feel underneath your back. Notice if it's the same on the right side of your low back as on the left. Notice if you can feel your spine all the way up through your shoulders. Can you sense where your shoulders are? And, you know, don't worry about it if it's clear, if it's not clear. This is about mapping out more of your self-image, because if you imagine a baseball player, for example, if they have no real clear sense of where they are in space, how are they going to hit a ball, right? So the more adept you need to be to do any athletic endeavor, but also to have good balance as we age, we lose some clarity about where our parts are, right? So what's really important is expanding our awareness so that we have a more clear self-image of ourselves. The front of yourself as you breathe in, and as you exhale, notice where you move. Do you have a sense of where your ribs move? We have these constructs and concepts about what we do that are not actually accurate, or that are only accurate because we've grown accustomed to certain limitations, when actually more is possible. For example, if you take a deep breath in, do you feel your chest expanding forward? Do you experience your chest could actually expand upwards as well as forward from your point of view, from your perspective? And that each of the ribs can expand sideways. They actually come apart like an accordion if there's not excessive tension between the tiny little muscles in between each of the ribs. And then take your head for a little spin, just lying on your back. Just very slowly start to roll your head a little bit, gradually getting bigger, only going as far as you can go easily, just rolling it a little bit left and right, and noticing what's the quality of sensation you feel in your neck on each side. Does it feel tight? Just notice where it feels tight with no judgment. It's just an assessment and like an inventory, a starting point. And notice where it's easy and make it gradually smaller until you stop rolling your head. And when you do that, throughout, sometimes we go back to that throughout the lesson, and you'll find that as you can make changes as you're paying attention and moving very slowly that actually happen very quickly. And your nervous system, given time to process like this, will actually recalibrate where center is. So what do I mean by that? If you imagine a line from the top of your head through the base of your tailbone, is your head actually over your skeleton, or is a little bit to one side? Or conversely, is that line have a bit of a C curve? Or you might notice that your chin is a little bit closer to one shoulder than the other. These are the tiny little details that we're going to come back to at the end. And now, as you're resting, could you take your eyes, keep your eyes closed, or look at the ceiling, whatever feels easy for you, but look straight ahead of you, and then take your eyes a little bit to the right, and then back to center, and notice that it's a really tiny little move, because the muscles of the eyes are very small. Your intention isn't to turn your head to the right, just only go as far as you can go with your eyes to the right. And just do this a couple of times very gently. Notice if you can move your eyes to the right so that you're moving them so that it's level, so that they don't sort of veer up or veer down. So this is actually really good for training people to be very systematic, and I think horses appreciate that. They like clarity and systematic training. And then let that go with the eyes. And now this lesson is done on the stomach. So very slowly, if you would, turn to roll onto your stomach. And you're going to have your right arm on the floor overhead. And if you can turn your head towards, your left arm. So you're going to roll onto your stomach. Your left arm is overhead, and your right arm is down by your side. Your head is turned towards your left arm, which is on the floor overhead. And then your legs are long. If you would bend your left knee so that your thigh is on the floor, but your foot and your toes are pointing up towards the ceiling. And very slowly start to see if you can lift your calf and your foot towards the ceiling such that your knee comes a little bit up off the floor, followed by your hip, so that your knee sort of lifts up off the floor. And it may be only an inch or two. And if that seems a little bit hard, you can kind of reverse it by tapping your knee on the floor, bump, 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 just to get a sense of what does it mean to just lift the knee up off the floor and allow the pelvis to follow. Because mostly we do it the other way around, right? We're sort of reversing things here just for the sake of making it really non-habitual. And then let that go and bring your attention to your foot in space, and notice that your toes, the ball of your foot, tends to sort of flop up towards the ceiling when you're not really trying to do anything with it. So could you start to make your foot level with the ceiling? And then just hold your foot in that position. And that is often actually easier for riders because they are used to having a very long heel, right? So with your foot in this position, so it's level, if you will, start to allow your left leg to roll over your thigh so that your calf and your foot goes to the other side of the straight right leg. And just notice how could you very gently, it's almost like you're letting your left calf fall onto your right calf with the intention of taking your knee backwards so that you roll, your lower body almost rolls onto your back, and you end up perhaps, your upper body is still sort of, it's turning, but it's still more or less on the floor. But your left leg is going in the direction of actually standing, so that if you could roll with part of your lower body, you'd end up with your left foot on the floor and your knee up towards the ceiling. So see if you can find a way to roll from your belly so that your lower body is mostly on your back, and then your foot comes up, your foot actually comes down to rest on the floor as your knee comes up. So it's like this fulcrum in the middle of your calf, with your knee coming up and your foot coming down, and then as you roll back onto your belly, your knee comes down and your foot comes up. And it's kind of a strange movement at first. So go ahead and take a rest on your back. And as you're resting, notice if maybe any part of you, it feels like it's been working too hard. It's when we rest that we can notice these things. But if we never rest, we don't notice. And that's how we hurt ourselves. So move slowly. I'm just going to go through the principles I want you to be aware of, because these principles are great principles to live by. So as you're resting, just think about all the movements you do slowly, do gradually, because it's hard to hurt yourself if you do them slowly with awareness. Number 2 is take brief rests whenever you want. We do a lot of rests because it's about processing and making neural connections. But if you need a rest in between at any time, please do so. You're in charge of your own experience, and the first person to rest wins in this context. And you're both subject and object, and your experience is of primary importance. So it's like you're doing an exploration in which you're studying and doing an inquiry into your own experience. All right. And when you're ready, could you roll back onto your belly in the same starting position? So you're on your belly, your head is turned to the left, your left arm is on the floor, so that your hand is on the floor, sort of a little bit over your head, and your elbows on the floor. Your right arm is behind and alongside you. Your right leg is long. Bend your left knee so that your left foot comes up towards the ceiling, and allow your foot to be level as you start to play again with this idea of allowing your left foot to sort of fall onto your right calf, with the intention ultimately of allowing your lower body to rotate so that you end up almost on your back with your lower body, your foot's on the floor, and your knee is up towards the ceiling. And then go back onto your belly. And do this several times. Notice that the outcome of the lesson isn't important. It's the exploration of how you engage with yourself, the quality of the way you are with yourself that we're really investigating here. And notice how you participate with the floor as you breathe and as you move. Notice if there are places in this movement where it's easier to breathe. Is it easier if you press through the floor with your hand or with your elbow? This is what's known as ground forces, right? Babies don't know how to use ground forces. Adults do, but they don't even realize they're doing it. So start to become aware of how, it could be easier maybe if I press through my hand, if I press through my elbow, if I press through the other leg. We think that we can move with one part of our body and that the other part of our body is not doing anything, but it's stabilizing you on the ground. And then see if you can rest for a moment on your belly. And if for some reason this is hard on your neck, feel free to use a bolster or a thin, flat, maybe a towel under your head if that's helpful to make it more comfortable to have your head turned to the other side. Or as you're resting, you can turn your head in the other direction just to give it a little bit of a time where it's not in this somewhat extreme position. And then when you're ready, could you go once more onto your belly in this same starting position where you're looking to the left, your left arm on the floor, right arm behind you long, right leg long. Bend your left knee, take your left foot up uh, so that the foot is level, but bent knee so that the foot is towards the ceiling. And then could you, instead of maybe touch base with what you just did, with the lower body leading, and then pause and change the synchronization so that you're taking your upper body just in the direction of looking up towards the ceiling. You're not going to be able to go that far with your upper body. But think about reversing the movement so that you start with your upper body and then the lower body follows. So you're kind of reversing the whole thing. And notice, is there a way you can do this such that you're not pressing into the floor, but that you're using your torso, you're using your core, you're using the center of yourself, and there's less weight, less pressing into the floor. It's as if you're attempting to make yourself lighter by rolling, by using the center of yourself. And then when you're ready, this is not necessarily a beginning lesson. So take it gentle, be gentle with yourself, roll onto your back and take a complete rest and just experience what a joy it can be to be completely still after moving with this level of attention. In a way, this is an investigation of the underlying premises you hold. So just as in some of the other classes I teach where we look at beliefs that limit us, I think one of the things that brought me to this topic of structure and noticing the structure of support that we have is that we have all these new limitations that have been imposed on us, like this idea that we shouldn't go out. Well, we're not supposed to go out and hang out where there are lots of people, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't go for a walk and enjoy the day, like by ourselves, because nature is one of the most restorative things. And so by getting into the habit of doing these lessons, which really on some level teach you to think outside the box, to notice, to question what your assumptions are, to question what the limitations are that you think are real. Because some of the limitations that we have are constructs. They're ideas that somebody else told us, or they're ideas that society imposes on us. So it's an investigation of habits and patterns and noticing, which ones of them are serving us and which ones are not. So now as you're lying on your back, think about this movement that you were doing on your stomach and imagine doing it without actually doing it. And then pause. And now bend your left knee and stand your left foot. And maybe put your left arm overhead flat on the floor. And could you take your torso, like rolling on in the direction of rolling onto your belly, maybe at first through your foot, allowing that to lengthen your pelvis so that you're rolling onto your right side of your pelvis. The left side of the pelvis comes up and rolls over, and your arm kind of comes so that you end up in the starting position that we were in before. And could you make that reversible so you end up on your back by coming up all the way up with your upper body so that you end up on your back? And play with that gently, slowly, with an intention of noticing how could you lift so that you are lifting and turning sequentially, moving your attention along the entire length of yourself, so that as you come away from the floor, you find an interesting way to use your pelvis, like a quality of attention and organization that allows you to find support within yourself, that distributes the support along the whole of yourself, so that eventually you stop pushing through your foot, and instead of pressing, and you end up using the core of yourself to roll onto your belly and the core of yourself to roll back. Can you find a way to engage your pelvis such that when you do have your foot on the floor, you feel the head of your femur in its socket in your hip, so that the force from the foot through the leg into your skeleton is direct and clear. And then come to rest on your back whenever you're ready. So Feldenkrais had this idea that whenever something is done skillfully, it should be something that we can do reversibly. And I understand it's said, I'm not sure if this is true, but it's said that horses in the wild do not go backwards. They're like motorcycles, they don't have a reverse, right? We teach them to walk backwards. And so we're helping them on some level become safer, become more in their bodies, because when you're more in your body, when you're more present, when you're more connected to the earth, when you're more grounded, when you have more of a sense of solidity, you're safer in space. And as you rest, please notice the quality of the sensation you feel as you lie on the floor, and notice the differences between the quality of sensation on the left side of your body compared to the right side of your body. Is there any difference in the quality of sensation you notice on the left side of your neck compared to the right side of your neck? And could you roll your head a little bit right and left and right, and gradually make it smaller, but just noticing if anything has changed in the way that your head or your neck moves when it rolls. Is there a difference in the quality of sensation you feel on the right side of your neck or the left, or some difference in the ease with which you can roll on one side more than the other? So if you remember anything about neurology and how the brain is organized, the left side actually activates the right side, and the right side actually activates the left side, and the corpus callosum connects the two. And the more coordinated we get, the better that connection is. And so this is part of what we're fleshing out with this self-image. And then when you're resting with your head still, pause. And notice there are these consistent things with coordination. Rhythm is a factor. Say you're trying to enter a stream of traffic, right? The cars go by, you have to sort of get into the rhythm of it. Maybe you count, like the last car, 1, 2, 3, boom, now it's time to go, right? So rhythm is very much a part of learning. It's a part of coordination. And so pausing in between when you change a rhythm, that's also a piece. And if you would, just as you're resting there, could you with notice if I ask you to take your eyes a little bit to the right and be soft in your neck, and then you're looking straight at the ceiling. Did you actually do this with your eyes open, or did you do it with your eyes closed? Everyone will have a different response. So the point is to notice that you have habits about things you're not even aware of having habits about. So that's know thyself is the thing we have time to do in service of not just of being safer, but of also creating a life we want to live that's more pleasurable, that's more fulfilling. And if you're soft with your neck and head as you take your eyes to the right, if you did so with your eyes closed, try doing it with your eyes open, and let yourself notice that your head wants to follow, right? So there's a relationship between the way that the eyes organize the neck that most of us are unaware of. And that when you start to play with this, you can use it to intentionally relax the muscles of your neck and shoulders. If you bring that to a halt and just be still, just notice the quality of sensation on each side of your neck again. And then when you're ready, if you would, roll onto your belly, and we're going to try this on the other side. So what would that mean? That would mean your head is turned to the right, your right arm is on the floor so that your elbow and your hand is up maybe over your head. Your right arm is on the floor in front of your face is turned to the right. Your left arm is long down by your side, your left leg is long. Bend your right knee. Bring your right foot towards the ceiling, and just notice the position of your foot when you don't do anything. And then notice that as you try to make your foot level with the ceiling, that it's not entirely easy to gauge, right? So what is level when you're talking about something behind you that you can't see? And are you overcompensating? Like, do we have a real clear sense of that? And then try the first move that we did in the very beginning, which was just to lift the thigh off the floor, leaving the pelvis on the floor. And maybe it's only going to come up an inch or two. Just try having your heel lead, because that maybe almost makes it easier to keep the foot level. And then if it's unclear, you can reverse it such that you're thinking about almost lightly just pump, 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 pounding, lightly tamping your thigh on the floor. So the emphasis is on landing rather than lifting. And then go back to just lifting your thigh slightly off the floor, leaving your pelvis where it is. And notice if it's clearer, having reversed your intention. And then maybe just rest there for a moment. Be still. Please come again. So you're in this starting position. Your right knee is bent, foot is level with the ceiling. And as you start to allow your right leg to sort of roll over your thigh so that your calf starts to fall in the direction of your straight leg, so that your foot starts to fall on the other side of your straight leg, gradually allowing yourself to use as much of you as you can. So you're spreading the effort throughout your whole self so that your upper body can come with you whenever it needs to. And you're gradually allowing your right foot to find the floor on the other side of your straight leg so that your body is rolling in the direction of being on your back. Your upper body follows. At some point, your the side of your foot's on the floor. You bring your knee up towards the ceiling so that your foot could be on the floor, and whatever part of your upper body is turned is turned also. And then come back onto your belly and try this many times, moving with an awareness of how you use your eyes, how soft you can be in your jaw. So we talk about like background, foreground, right? So in the foreground, your intention is to do this movement and figure out like, how do I do this easily? How do I do it in a way that spreads the effort throughout myself? But in the background, also being aware of any place where you feel like you're doing too much, so that you're spreading the effort throughout your whole self. So as you do it, could you float yourself backwards by distributing the activity throughout, along your ribs, along your leg, along all the surfaces that are touching the floor, stabilizing you as you rotate? And how could you use your ribs to engage the floor in a way that invites you to lift up away from the floor? How is it inviting to start from some other part rather than starting from the thigh or the foot and having the pelvis follow? See how much of yourself you could invite and include. How much of you could you expand your awareness to include what you're experiencing on the inside and the outside at the same time? And then whenever you had enough, feel free to take a rest on your back and just notice what feels like it's drawing your attention now as you rest. Where is your awareness drawn as you rest? Can you sense yourself more clearly? Is your internal sense of your skeleton more clear to you now? Is the map of your self-image becoming more fleshed out as a part of yourself? And again, as always, as you rest, you sense some parts of yourself having been more active than others. And this is important because I would say most people tend to overuse the low back and then muscles or the rotation of the neck. And there's like this blind spot in the thoracic spine, but that area also has many, many degrees of rotation all the way up each and every one of those vertebrae. So how could you bring more of yourself to the table so that no one part of you is working too hard? And when you're ready, come again to the starting position with your head to the right, your right arm up overhead, your right leg long, left arm long. Bend the left knee, foot comes up towards the ceiling, flat. Make the ankle level. And then just touch base with this movement a few more times so that you're distributing the effort throughout the whole of yourself. And then think it's going to be smaller if you initiate from the top, from the upper body first, and let the lower body follow. But just think, how could I rotate my upper body first so that the lower body then follows, and you're moving not by pressing so much as by lifting or by using the center of yourself, the core of yourself. And as you do so, alternate your attention so that maybe once you're noticing what you're doing with your heel, with your pelvis, and then attend to the earliest moment that you experience the weight. And could it be reversible so that as you come back, the speed is the same in both directions? And then when you're ready, rest on your back once more. And we'll go again from the back this time. But before you move, just imagine what you just did and think of it as you're imagining doing it from your belly without actually rolling onto your belly. Imagine lifting rather than pressing. Imagine how could you lift rather than allow yourself to fall. So as you come back to the starting position, that you're not falling into place. How can you do these movements in such a way that you lengthen, that you expand, that you actually get longer? And then when you're ready, lying on your back, you're going to bend and stand the right knee. And the right arm is going to be overhead so that the back of your hand is on the floor as best you can manage. Pressing less and less, and more you're rolling back and forth from the core of yourself. Sensing how you can use the floor underneath you to contribute to making the entire movement light and easy. Like at what point does your pelvis engage? And how reversible is this so that you're actually ending up on your belly, and then maybe you're ending up on your back, and you try reversing it so that the upper body leads rather than the lower body. And leave it, please, and rest. And just note the sensations you're left with in resting. And notice what's available in breathing. Notice that if you exhale and you just wait, your breath comes to you easily without thought, that you can trust your nervous system. It's got your back. It literally has your back. Its role is to protect the brain, right? So that's why it's so important that you feel safe and comfortable when you're doing this, because that's when you can make the most significant changes the most quickly. We don't learn well when we're under duress. And notice that there are places within yourself that you maybe have not been using, have not even been aware of for quite some time, have not been accessing. So, what is available in your awareness now that you hadn't been aware of before we began? So, one more time, laying on your back, could you start now to take your eyes just to the left and back, noticing if you did this with your eyes open or your eyes closed. And if you chose one, then try the other, so that you start to have your own variations that you do. And notice that your head wants to go with. And then just, keep that really small, make it smaller until you let it stop. And again, once more, take your head for a spin. So you roll your head a little bit right and left, and notice how that feels. And then if you would, just rest and do another scan. So a final scan to compare, how do you feel your pressure on the floor now? And where else did we go? We went to the heels. Notice if your heels are contacting the floor in the same way. Check in with your lower back. Notice if there's the same space between your low back and the floor as there was before. Or if there's more clarity of your spine between your shoulder blades, maybe you feel more distance between your shoulder blades, or more expansion as you inhale and exhale. And notice the quality of your mind. Is your mind less active, more present, without having had to try and do anything to your mind? It just sort of naturally became a little bit quieter. Notice the way your alignment from the top of your head through your tailbone. Is it feel like your head is more over the middle of yourself, or more facing forward, or less symmetry is the question, right? Everybody wants symmetry, but it's not possible. It's not even safe to have structural symmetry. The way that we're asymmetrical is a function of our habits, which are related to our reflexes. And if we had to stop and think of which way to turn in an emergency, that would not be safe. So we have preferences, and we have asymmetries. But what we're doing here is looking for ways to be functionally symmetrical rather than physically symmetrical. And notice that when you contemplate coming to roll onto one side and come to standing, one side feels more inviting than the other, right? We have preferences about everything, and we're just not aware of that. And so when you're ready, could you come to standing so slowly that you could really track how you do this amazing thing, without which your quality of life would be forever impaired? How do you come to standing? Can you expand your awareness to include more of all of yourself as you come to standing? And stand in the place that you stood in when you first did your scan in standing. If you can remember what that was, and turn a little bit to your right with your whole body, turning your head and your shoulders and your hips. And notice if you can go farther than you could go when you first started. Only going to what's easy. No need to blow past limitations. Just respect them, which is another great principle to take into your life. So that you then turn to your left and notice the same thing. Can you go farther? But can you go farther easily? And take it for a little walk too. Walking is another very important function. And notice how much rotation facilitates walking with a great sense of ease and balance, and just freedom of motion, and how satisfying that feels. It's really interesting how many memories we have that are latent, and some of them are good and some of them are not, right? So we want to really augment the qualities, the memories that are good, right? So that's another piece of this structure that we're trying to create. A structure of support focuses on what works, focuses on what feels good. And and that would be the thought I would love to leave you with for the rest of the week.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're welcome. You look very more open and relaxed in your face.
Yes, yes.